Have you ever been part of a moment so perfect it felt like a dream you never wanted to wake from? Not because everything was flawless, but because for just a few breaths the world slowed down and you were exactly where you needed to be. That's how it feels to be aboard the RMS Titanic on this clear April night in 1912. Close your eyes and allow your breath to slow. Picture the quiet sway of a ship moving steadily through the still waters of the Atlantic on a clear night. You are standing at the edge of a gleaming deck, while the crisp air carries the scent of salt and the faint aroma of polished wood. Golden light spills from the grand windows and dances across the black surface of the ocean. Far below your feet, the steady hum of the engines sends a gentle vibration through the boards beneath you, a reminder of the great force carrying you forward into the open sea. This is the RMS Titanic on her first and only voyage, a floating palace of steel and dreams built to carry hundreds of lives across the ocean. As we travel through her decks and corridors together, let your mind remain with me until the very last word, so you can hear every step, every voice, and every quiet moment of the journey. If you wish, share where in time or where in the world you are listening from, and I will read it as part of this voyage. If you would like to return for another night's passage, follow the channel and I'll be here to welcome you aboard again. The night sky above is a canopy of stars so bright that the horizon seems to dissolve into their light. A cool breeze moves across your face and through the folds of your coat. In the distance, a low murmur of conversation blends with the soft notes of a string quartet playing in the first-class lounge. Their music floats across the deck and reaches you with the delicacy of a whisper. The lamps along the promenade cast a warm glow, guiding the steps of passengers who stroll slowly, stopping now and then to lean against the railing and gaze at the endless ocean. Every detail around you has been designed to impress. The polished brass fittings reflect the light like captured sunshine. The carved wood paneling feels smooth and cool beneath your fingertips. The air is rich with the faint scent of coal smoke drifting up from the funnels, mingling with the perfume worn by the elegantly dressed guests. The sea remains calm, its surface broken only by the rhythm of the ship's passage, each wave curling and parting in silence somewhere below. In two second-class library, travelers gather around a table, speaking in hushed tones as they share books, letters, and postcards. In the third-class common rooms, families sit together, their laughter mingling with the sounds of fiddles and the stamping of feet in lively dances. The Titanic holds many worlds within her steel frame, each with its own voices, stories, and dreams. Tonight, all of those stories are still unfolding, unaware of what history will remember. For now, the only thing that matters is the sense of being carried forward into a vast and endless night. You are a witness to this moment, a guest among the passengers and crew, free to wander and listen. As we begin this voyage together, let your mind slow to the pace of the ship's steady heartbeat. Feel the deck beneath your feet, the railing beneath your hands, the cool night air on your skin. Let each sound, each flicker of light, and each quiet movement settle into your thoughts. We will step back in time to understand the world that gave birth to this ship, the lives it carried, and the moments that made this night so vivid. Our journey begins, not with the ship herself, but with the world that awaited her arrival. Before the Titanic's grand silhouette rose above the docks, before her name was spoken in ports and printed in newspapers, the world was moving at a gentler pace. The year was 1912, and life, for many, unfolded in rhythms that had been unchanged for decades. In the streets of London, the clip-clop of horses pulling carriages still mingled with the distant hiss of steam trains arriving at great stations. Lamplighters made their rounds at dusk, igniting warm points of light along cobbled roads. The scent of fresh bread drifted from bakeries, mingling with the sharp smell of coal smoke from narrow chimneys. Across the Atlantic, in New York, mornings began with the hum of trolley cars and the rush of feet along broad avenues. The skyline was just beginning to rise higher, steel and stone reaching for the clouds. Women in long skirts and wide hats passed men in tailored suits, their conversations blending with the sound of vendors calling out their wares. The world was on the edge of modernity, where old traditions and new inventions lived side by side. At sea, great liners were already crossing the oceans, carrying letters, goods, and dreams between continents. yet none had yet matched the scale or ambition of the ship that was being prepared in the Belfast shipyards. In those yards, the air was thick with the clang of hammers and the scent of freshly cut timber. Workers in flat caps and heavy coats moved among towering cranes, their voices lost in the roar of industry. For those who would soon board the Titanic, life before the voyage was filled with small details and quiet anticipation. In England's countryside, families gathered around kitchen tables to speak of opportunities abroad. In the parlors of New York, wealthy travelers discussed the elegance of the White Star Line and compared cabins on its newest vessel. In small towns and cities across Europe, tickets were folded carefully into pockets or kept in drawers, treasured as a promise of something better. The world that we're leaving behind was not always gentle. Many sought escape from crowded streets, from hard winters, from lives hemmed in by poverty or limited opportunity. Others traveled for adventure, for business, or for the simple pleasure of crossing the sea in comfort. Yet in every case, the idea of stepping aboard such a ship felt like touching the future. Spring had begun to soften the air. In the ports, gulls wheeled and cried above the masts, and the tide carried the scent of distant shores. Newspapers spoke of progress, of records to be broken, of the marvels of engineering that would shape the century to come. Beneath it all ran an unspoken faith in human skill, in steel and steam, in the certainty that the world could only move forward. As the final days before departure approached, luggage was packed, goodbyes were exchanged, and dreams began to gather like the clouds above the docks. Soon, these travelers would stand where you now stand, gazing out at the horizon from the deck of the most celebrated ship in the world. But before that moment, there was the hum of life as it had always been, unaware of how quickly history can turn. There are moments in history when something new begins to breathe before the world even notices. You can almost feel it if you stand still long enough, the faint hum of change, the vibration that runs beneath the surface of ordinary life. In the early months of 1912, that hum seemed to gather in Belfast, in the great shipyards that faced the cold waters of the River Lagan. Here, among the cranes and scaffolds that cut into the gray sky, a new marvel was taking shape. Its ribs of steel rose from the ground like the bones of a creature too immense to belong to the earth. Workers moved through the haze of smoke and hammer strikes, their voices swallowed by the clang of progress. The air smelled of oil and hot metal, of fresh paint and sea, mist a scent that seemed to promise both invention and escape. You can imagine yourself there, watching from a distance, as the skeleton of the ship grows day by day, its hull expanding into something that feels less like a vessel and more like a declaration. To those who built her, the Titanic was not merely a ship, it was a vision made solid, a proof that human hands could command even the ocean's indifference. Each rivet, each plate, each glimmer of brass carried a kind of pride that could not be spoken aloud. The men who hammered those plates knew that they were crafting something that would outlast them, though none could imagine how deeply that would prove true. In the stillness of early morning, before the yard filled with noise, a strange reverence hung in the air, the quiet awe of creation itself. When she was first launched, the Titanic did not yet have her final shape. She slid into the water smooth as silk, the crowd's cheer rising like a wave behind her. The river seemed to hold her gently, as if acknowledging that something extraordinary had entered its care. Even from a distance, she looked unlike anything that had come before. Vast, gleaming, serene. Her name Titanic was both a promise and a whisper, a word that seemed to contain within it the echo of myth. Those who saw her that day spoke of her as if she were alive, as if the sea itself had finally agreed to share its throne. In the months that followed, the ship became a world in the making. Inside her, artisans and engineers worked side by side, filling every room with a quiet poetry of detail. The grand staircase, with its carved oak and soft glow of brass, seemed to invite footsteps that had not yet fallen. The staterooms, lined with polished wood and silken curtains, waited in patient stillness for laughter and conversation. Even the corridors, long and narrow, breathed a kind of anticipation, the hush before the first note of music begins. You can almost hear it now. The soft brush of a cloth over glass, the faint click of tools, the murmured voices of workers testing the lights. Each sound is small, but together they build a melody of readiness. News of the ship spread quickly. In the drawing rooms of London and Paris, in cafes in New York, people spoke of the Titanic as if she belonged to the future. Newspapers printed sketches of her decks, lists of her luxuries, and words that shimmered with wonder. Unsinkable, magnificent, a floating city. To the rich, she was the newest expression of human elegance. To the poor, she was a promise of passage to a brighter life. Even those who would never set foot aboard could not help but dream through her. It was as if the ship herself had cast a spell across oceans, awakening the old yearning to begin again somewhere new. And so, as spring crept closer, preparations took on a rhythm of quiet urgency. In ports and train stations, luggage piled high, families gathered tickets in trembling hands. Letters of farewell were sealed and sent. The world seemed to hold its breath. On the docks at Southampton, the air tasted of salt and coal smoke, and seagulls wheeled above the forest of masts. Porters called names. Children pressed their faces to the railings. And somewhere in the distance, the Titanic's whistles let out a low, resonant note that trembled through the air like a heartbeat. It was a sound of promise, deep and certain, that rolled over the harbor and lingered in every chest that heard it. You step closer, drawn by that sound. The ship looms ahead, enormous, radiant, and impossibly still. The sunlight glances off her hull, scattering across the water like shards of glass. Her name is painted clean and bold on the bow, letters so tall they seem to speak for themselves. The gangways are lined with figures in hats and coats, each one pausing for a moment to look up before crossing into that floating world. Some are smiling, others quiet, all of them caught between the life they have known and the one that waits at sea. Around them, the hum of the crowd rises and falls, a human tide meeting the rhythm of the waves. Inside, the ship feels like a cathedral of motion waiting to begin. The chandeliers sway gently as if breathing, the carpets soft beneath the echo of first footsteps. Crew members move with practiced grace, their uniforms crisp, their expressions both proud and calm. In the dining saloon, silverware gleams under the glow of electric light, the future shimmering quietly upon every surface. There is an energy here, almost invisible but unmistakable, a sense that something larger than anyone present is about to unfold. You can feel it in the fingertips that brush the railings, in the way conversations pause mid-sentence, in the faint flutter of a curtain as the wind finds its way inside. On the upper decks, a few early passengers stand together, gazing out at the harbor as if trying to memorize it. They lean on the rails, listening to the water slap gently against the hull. The sky is wide and pale, the color of morning porcelain. Somewhere nearby, a ship's bell rings one. Then two, and its sound carries through the air like a signal, calling everyone closer to the moment of departure. A woman adjusts her hat and glances toward the horizon. A man beside her checks his watch, though there is still time. The mood is not hurried, but poised, like the final inhale before a long exhale. Even the sea seems to wait. And in that stillness, beneath the bustle of preparation, there is a quieter whisper of feeling that something extraordinary has been set in motion, something that will ripple far beyond the edges of this harbor. You might not name it yet, if you could, but it lives in the air, in the rhythm of footsteps crossing the gang, in the first greetings between strangers who will soon share the same horizon. It hums in the wires of the telegraph, in the engines below deck, waiting for the signal to breathe. It is the sound of a new path unfurling across the water. As the sun begins its slow descent, the ship's reflection stretches long across the rippling sea, doubling her image in gold and shadow. The harbor quiets, for a moment, as though the world itself were listening. Somewhere far below, a final wrench is turned, a valve released, a line coiled and stowed away. Everything is ready. The Titanic waits, with the stillness of something alive, her soul poised between the earth that built her and the ocean that will claim her. The evening air is cool and tender, and the wind carries the scent of coal, paint, and faraway rain. A new chapter has opened, though none aboard can yet read the shape of its ending. For now, there is only the beginning, the hum of life gathering aboard, the slow beating of engines soon to start, and the quiet, certain truth that history is about to take its first breath. The sound comes first to deep, resonant note that rolls across the harbor like the voice of something ancient, waking from a long sleep. Then, slowly, the great ship begins to move. The ropes that have held her to the dock strain and loosen. The water around her churns in wide, slow circles. People on shore raise their hands in farewell, their voices carrying across the widening distance in fragments of sound laughter, calling, the echo of names that dissolve into the wind. You stand near the railing, feeling the deck tremble beneath your feet as the engines find their rhythm. It is not a violent motion, but a steady, deliberate pulse like a heartbeat deep within the ship. The Titanic is alive now, and she is moving forward. The city behind you softens as the distance grows. The smoke of the harbor drifts into the pale sky, and the buildings become outlines fading in the haze. Somewhere, a band is still playing on the quay, its music faint and uncertain, a last tether to the world left behind. The water catches the light like glass, reflecting the slow movement of gulls that wheel and cry above. You feel the wind shift, carrying with it the mingled scents of salt and coal, and there is a sweetness to it, the taste of beginnings. Around you, passengers gather along the rails, some waving handkerchiefs until the shore is only a blur. Others silent, their eyes wide with wonder or heavy with thought. The world has begun to slide away. For a moment, the movement feels almost unreal, as if the entire ship were gliding through air rather than water. The engines hum steadily below, the sound spreading through the floors and walls until it becomes a part of your own breathing. Somewhere aft, a child laughs, a bright, clear sound that rises above the deep mechanical rhythm. The decks tilt ever so slightly as the ship turns toward open sea, and sunlight breaks across the polished brass like scattered coins. Every detail gleams with purpose. The white paint of the lifeboats, the dark wood of the railings, the brass nameplates that catch the light. You can feel the weight of craftsmanship in every surface you touch, as if the builders themselves had left a trace of pride in the grain of the wood. As the harbor recedes, the mood aboard shifts from farewell to discovery. Conversations begin again, tentative at first, then warmer. Strangers exchange glances that will soon become acquaintances, perhaps friendships. The ship's corridors are alive with Mosham porters guiding luggage, stewards adjusting uniforms, passengers finding their way as if exploring the interior of a dream. In the first-class lounge, the scent of flowers fills the air. In second class, the soft shuffle of cards marks the start of a game. Below, in the third-class common rooms, a fiddle begins to play, and the rhythm of its song carries upward through the decks, a heartbeat of human joy that refuses to stay contained. You wander the promenade deck, where the air feels clearer, touched by the faint spray of the sea. The horizon stretches wide and clean, no longer crowded with masts or smoke. The ship moves smoothly now, and with each passing minute the motion feels more natural, as if the body has remembered an old rhythm it had once forgotten. The sound of footsteps mingles with the rush of water against the hull. A woman nearby lifts her face to the wind and closes her eyes. A man beside her tilts his hat and smiles into the distance. There's a sense that everyone is learning to breathe again, this time in the language of the sea. Inside, the ship is a small universe unfolding. Lamps glow softly in long corridors that seem to stretch forever, and behind closed doors, the quiet thrum of life begins to take shape. Laughter rises from the dining rooms, and the scent of soup and baked bread drifts through the air. You pass a steward polishing a banister until it gleams, his movements slow and careful, as if he were tending a ritual rather than a duty. In one corner, a couple studies a map of the Atlantic spread across a table, their fingers tracing the route to New York. The line across the ocean looks simple, almost fragile thread, drawn across blue paper. No one mentions the vastness it represents. The afternoon unfolds in a gentle rhythm. Children chase one another along the deck, their shouts echoing like birdsong. The ship's whistle sounds again, lower now, a reminder of distance growing. In the smoking room, voices murmur beneath clouds of fragrant smoke. In the reading room, pages turn softly, the words absorbing the mind in other worlds. Somewhere below, the machinery continues its ceaseless pulse-coal meeting fire, steam pressing through pipes, the invisible labor that turns metal into motion. Every part of the Titanic seems to move in harmony, an orchestra of sound and rhythm that carries you forward through time and tide. As evening begins to fall, The sky deepens to a bruised violet. The first stars appear, reflected in the darkening sea. Lamps flicker to life along the decks, casting pools of golden light that sway gently with the motion of the ship. Dinner is served behind the tall windows of the dining saloons, where music drifts faintly from a string quartet. The clink of glasses, the low hum of conversation, each sound folds into the next, until it becomes something like a lullaby. Outside, the night wind sharpens, and the smell of the sea grows purer, colder. You rest your hands on the railing and watch the wake stretching behind like a long, luminous ribbon disappearing into dusk. In this light, the Titanic feels not only immense, but alive in a softer, quieter way. Her decks seem to breathe. Her lights flicker like thoughts moving through a dreaming mind. Somewhere deep within, thousands of tiny mechanisms are at work. Wheels and valves, each turning with mathematical precision. But what reaches you here is only the gentlest of sensations. The faint vibration beneath your fingertips. The smooth gliding motion that feels almost effortless. It is easy to believe, in T's moment, that the sea has accepted her without question, that the night itself has opened to welcome her passage. And yet, for all the splendor and movement, what stays with you most is the feeling of transition, the delicate balance between what has been left behind and what lies ahead. The land has vanished from sight, but its memory lingers like a scent in the air. The future remains invisible, stretched out somewhere beyond the line of stars. You are suspended between them, carried forward by a power both mechanical and mysterious. Around you, voices rise and fall in patterns that could be mistaken for waves. The journey has begun, and with it comes the quiet awareness that nothing, not even the sea, will ever feel quite the same again. Later, when most passengers have gone below and the decks are nearly empty, you remain outside. The wind plays gently with your hair, and the sound of the water deepens to a steady murmur. The stars above seem close enough to touch, scattered across the sky like frost. You take a slow breath, and for a moment you can feel the rhythm of everything: the ship, the sea, the sky, all moving together in one long, patient exhale. This is the first step forward, the quiet crossing from one world into another, and it feels less like departure than awakening. By the second day at sea, the Titanic is settled into a rhythm of vast, floating city, breathing in perfect tempo with the ocean. You wake to the faint hum of engines far below, a sound that has already begun to feel familiar, like the pulse of something steady and alive. The morning light seeps softly through the curtains, filtered by the quiet mist that hangs over the water. The air carries a chill that sharpens the senses, and somewhere beyond the window, gulls trace lazy arcs before vanishing into the horizon. The ship moves as if gliding through another world, one suspended between sky and sea, where time seems to stretch and fold back upon itself. You step out onto the deck, and the air greets you with its cool, briny touch. The horizon stretches endlessly, broken only by the gentle sway of the waves and the faint line where the world dissolves into blue. Around you, life hums softly into motion. Stewards in crisp uniforms hurry by with trays balanced effortlessly, their movements fluid, rehearsed. Passengers stroll the promenade, their footsteps a rhythm against the boards. Somewhere nearby, laughter ripples through the morning air, mingling with the distant clang of the engine bells and the low murmur of conversation. It feels as though the ship herself is waking, stretching her limbs before another long day of crossing. In first class, the world gleams with polish and poise. Sunlight falls through tall windows, scattering across marble floors and gilded mirrors. The dining saloon fills with the clink of fine china and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Men in tailored suits glance over newspapers while women in delicate silks exchange quiet greetings, their voices soft as the rustle of lace. There is a grace to everything here, a choreography of gestures and glances that gives the impression of order without effort. Waiters move silently between tables, refilling cups before they are empty, arranging plates as though setting small stages for the day's unfolding performance. From somewhere beyond the grand staircase drifts the sound of a piano, its melody slow and wandering, as if it too is gazing out at the sea. In the reading and writing rooms, passengers lean over letters and postcards, their pens scratching softly against paper. Words meant for distant shores, messages to loved ones, promises of arrival, fragments of thought preserved between the rhythm of the waves, some pause mid-sense, caught by the sway of the ship or by a sudden burst of light across the window. It is easy to lose track of time here. The boundaries between morning and afternoon seem to blur, replaced by the steady continuum of the voyage itself. Conversations flow and fade, replaced by the hush of pages turning, the faint scent of ink and salt air. Below, in second class, the atmosphere is simpler, but no less alive. The air smells faintly of bread, tea, and the coal smoke that drifts upward from the funnels. Families gather for breakfast, children whispering excitedly about the endless ocean outside. A teacher traveling alone marks papers by the window, her handwriting delicate and patient. Nearby, a young couple speaks in low tones about the life waiting for them across the sea. There is warmth here, a sense of shared purpose, the understanding that every hour brings them closer to something unknown but hopeful. The rooms are filled with voices, the kind that rise and fall with familiarity, as if everyone aboard has known each other longer than a few days. Down another flight of stairs, in third class, the heartbeat of the ship grows louder. The air hums with life music, laughter, the shuffle of boots on wooden floors. Someone tunes a fiddle. Someone else stamps a rhythm that catches and spreads like fire. Here, the voyage is not just movement through space, but through possibility. People share stories in a dozen languages, each one painting pictures of faraway villages, of dreams too large for small towns to contain. The scent of stew and freshly baked bread lingers in the corridors, mingling with the earthy smell of damp wool and soap. There is less luxury, but more warmth, the kind that comes from community rather than comfort. Even the smallest cabin feels like a world in itself, a space of waiting, of whispered plans, of quiet resilience. Far below, in the belly of the ship, the rhythm takes on a deeper, more elemental tone. The engine rooms throb with heat and movement, their air thick with smoke and effort. Men shovel coal into open furnaces, the orange glow painting their faces in shifting patterns of light and shadow. The sound is constant, the roar of fire, the hiss of steam, the clang of metal on metal, but within it there is a strange music, the mechanical counterpart to the human life above. Here, time is measured in shovelfuls, in sweat, in the steady breathing of the engines. Every heartbeat of the Titanic begins here, unseen, in the labor of those who keep her alive. On T-Bridge, the officers watch the horizon, their eyes calm, their words few. The sea stretches out in all directions, serene and endless. Their work is quiet, but concentrated just in the wheel, noting the wind, marking positions on the charts. Beneath their measured focus lies a deep confidence, the kind that comes from routine and mastery. They know the language of the sea, its sighs, its moods, the subtle shifts that precede a change in weather. To them, the Titanic is not merely a marvel of engineering, but a living creature that must be listened to. The creak of the hull, the soft whistle of wind along the masts, the rhythm of the waves against the bow, all of it tells them where they are and how the world is turning. By midday, the ship has found her full stride. The ocean unfurls around her, shimmering under the pale light of the sun. The wake spreads behind like lace, unraveling over miles of silver-blue water. The sound of life aboard has become a steady murmur, a harmony of voices, footsteps, and the low sigh of the wind. Every deck, every corridor, every open space hums with movement, with purpose. And yet, within all that motion, there is peace. The world outside no longer feels like something to be conquered or crossed. It has become a companion, vast and breathing, keeping time with the ship's slow, deliberate pulse. As the afternoon fades, a softness settles over everything. The sun lowers, gilding the water in shades of amber and rose. Shadows stretch across the decks, and the sea takes on a deeper tone, like velvet folding into itself. Passengers linger outside, reluctant to leave the light. Some speak quietly of the journey, of the stars they hope to see that night. Others simply stand in silence, watching the horizon melt into color. The air cools, the sound of the engines softens to a purr, and the first faint glow of lamps begins to appear along the ship's long, graceful spine. And as night approaches, you realize that the Titanic has become its own small world, one that floats not just upon the sea, but within time itself. Every person aboard moves in rhythm with her, every heartbeat echoing the deep, patient thrum of her engines. The ship, the sea, and the people aboard are now one continuous motion each, feeding the other, each carrying the same quiet, unstoppable energy forward. Somewhere, deep within the great silence of the ocean, something ancient listens and remembers. There are places where tension does not arrive like a storm, but slips in like a cool draft beneath a door. Small, persistent, almost polite in the way it announces itself. On a ship that glides through calm seas, the most pressing disagreements are seldom loud. They fold into the fabric of daily life as a crease that will not quite lie flat. You can feel them if you pay attention, the tiny frown that appears when a steward clears a plate a moment too soon. The unspoken impatience of a passenger whose letter has not yet reached the postal clerk. The careful way to neighbors on the promenade choose their words to avoid an old quarrel. These are not the heroic conflicts of novels, but the quiet frictions that reveal what people value. Comfort, recognition, the small certainties that make a journey bearable. Listen to the ship, now its steady engines. The soft scrape of boots on brass, and imagine how each small complaint and each gentle accommodation adds up, like pebbles dropped into a wide, placid pool, their ripples crossing and meeting until they create a pattern you can sense more than see. In first class, the tensions often wear the same smile as the silverware. Manners act as a gentle barrier between dissatisfaction and outcry. A mislaid invitation, a seating arranged without consent, or a dress that fails to meet an imagined standard can sit heavy beneath the surface of polite conversation. Under the gilt chandeliers, people measure one another with the same care they measure their words, precisely because reputation is a fragile thing even amidst abundance. A hostess arranges the salon as if laying out a small ecosystem, and when someone's anecdote stumbles or a promised acquaintance does not arrive, the air tightens for a heartbeat. But alongside these small vexations there is reserve and a kind of private courage, the willingness to hold your displeasure in order to keep an evening gentle for others, a quiet decision to forgive a slight rather than amplify it in public. In the hush of the lounge, perfume and pipe smoke mingle in ribbons, and beneath those ribbons, people practice restraint as if it were another elegant art. Second class carries a different kind of hush, less gilded, more practical, threaded through with the soft anxiety of plans. Not yet assured. Here, the tensions are about time and money, about whether an appointment will be kept or a letter will reach a relative waiting on the other side. A man might count coins beneath his napkin while laughing at a story, or a woman might fold and refold a recently arrived photograph, smoothing it as if she could iron out the worry living in the margins. Children test their voices against the order of the day. An argument over who sits where at a long table can flare and then settle into an embarrassed silence that leaves everyone slightly changed. Yet the same compartments that hold worry also hold tenderness. A passenger who offers their blanket to a shivering neighbor. The quiet practice of sharing bread and stories so that fear becomes lighter in company. Courage here is practical and unassuming, the kind that wakes before dawn to mend a cuff, or that opens a pocket to offer a small coin, or that writes a hopeful line in a letter to be posted ashore. Down among the third-class bunks, where the air tastes of boiled cabbage and fresh soap, the conflicts are raw, and the courage more visible in the plainness of daily survival. Families huddle over steaming cups, and with a low, private dignity, they make space for grief and hope in the same breath. There are soft disputes over who will watch a sleeping child while another fetches water, over the last piece of bread that must be divided into parts, and in those small reckonings people show themselves in ways that luxury cannot buy. A mother calms a crying infant with a song that has nothing to do with language and everything to do with patience. An old man hums a tune from home to anchor the room against homesickness. The music of a fiddle in the corner knits those voices into a temporary family, and the courage is in the hands that steady a fragile bowl, in the shoulders that absorb another's burden without complaint. These acts are quiet, often unnoticed by those who pass on the higher decks, but they are the steady, uncelebrated backbone of the ship's life. Below decks, where coal dust settles into seams and the heat is a living thing, the crew carry their own conflicts wrapped in duty. Stokers work in a rhythm that is physical and almost meditative, shoveling the black light into hungry mouths that keep the ship moving. Their complaints are not for strangers, but for the small injustices of fatigue and weather. An engineer feels the weight of responsibility as a tangible pressure. Every gauge's whisper matters. Every bolt recalls 1,000 decisions, and the quiet argument is often with time itself. How long to press on, when to ease, whether to trust a gauge or the feel of the engines beneath your feet. Stewards navigate a different terrain of conflict. Men whose work is to provide comfort while enduring their own tiredness, who answered the same questions with the same masks of patience until they must find a way to speak the truth softly. There will be room, they say, or soon, and mean it. The courage of the crew is not dramatic. It is the steady competence that keeps plates level and furnaces fed, the decision to wake when others sleep, because the safety and ease of many depend on a few tireless hands. Among the officers and those whose duty is to steer and order, differences of opinion have the formality of map lines and log entries. Plans are compared, charts consulted, and sometimes a silence follows a suggestion, because what is being negotiated is not simply a route, but a principle, of balance between punctuality and prudence, between the expectations of passengers and the whispering sea. Small professional frictions bloom into careful conversations. The junior officer who questions a detail and the senior who remembers a different apprenticeship. The watchful mate who notes a minor discrepancy and the captain who considers how to phrase a correction without undoing trust. There is pride here, yes, and sometimes stubbornness, but also a modest bravery in admitting a mistake or in changing course when the smallest voice offers a better course of action. These exchanges are not the flash of drama, but the slow refining of judgment. The kind of courage that preserves order and lives through repetition rather than spectacle. Scattered through the day are objects that carry more conflict than any word. A letter left unsent for fear of its contents. A locket clasped shut against a sudden pang. A glove found in the corridor and quietly returned to its owner with a bow that says more than any apology. I think of a young sailor who notices a child's knitted cap abandoned on the rail and tucks it away until its owner is found. He will not tell anyone. The act itself is enough. Or of an elderly passenger who, seeing a younger couple in want of privacy in a crowded lounge, raises and offers his seat, as if the world had room enough for small sacrifices. These tiny moral gestures ripple outward. A kindness accepted becomes permission for another. A refusal to escalate a quarrel becomes a model for gentleness. They have the weight of stones placed precisely to build a wall that keeps out something slighter, but real the small cruelties. They can grow if left unchecked. There is a lesson in all this quietness. That conflict need not be loud to be important, and courage need not be ostentatious to be true. The ship is full of people, each practicing the art of living together at a slow, enforced intimacy, sharing air, meals, corridors, and the daily work of being human. In their small choices, they teach one another how to temper irritation with humor, how to thread apology into conversation so it does not snag, how to make room for grief without demanding an audience. If you listen closely, you will hear not only the friction but the soft rubbing that polishes it away. A hand offered a joke, told to break an awkward silence. A silence kept, because it is kinder than a harsh truth. As the light shifts and the day unwinds into another soft twilight, these quiet conflicts begin to gather not as storms, but as small bundles postponed or surrendered, tucked into corners of the ship like folded linens. There is bravery in that putting away. The courage to set down a complaint so someone else may sleep. The courage to say nothing when words would make a moment worse. The courage to offer a simple, sincere apology that mends what it touches. Let yourself sit with that for a moment. Imagine the hush of a corridor after the last guest has gone to rest. The faint glow of a lamp left on for a child. The scrape of a broom cleared and put away. Each of these is a kind of keeping watch. So we move forward with these small narratives, humming at the edges of everything. Unresolved, gently tended, braided into the larger rhythm of the voyage. They make the ship human, messy, and tender in the same breath. If you close your eyes now, picture one such momenta. Small kindness, the quiet solving of a problem. A voice lowered, so another can breathe in. Notice how your breath follows the shape of that soft resolution. We'll linger here a while longer, held by these modest acts, before the next hush arrives and reshapes the night. Night has a way of softening even the sharpest outlines, and aboard the Titanic, it folds over the decks like a great velvet curtain. The air is colder now, colder than it has been on any night since departure, and the sea below reflects the sky so perfectly that the line between them is nearly lost. Standing at the rail, you might feel as though you are floating between two infinities, one above, one below, both scattered with the same cold, indifferent stars. There is a hush over the ship, not the hush of sleep, but the hush of waiting, as though something unseen is approaching, moving as quietly as the tide. Most passengers are still unaware of any change. They read in warm lounges or speak in low voices over late-night cups of tea. Yet somewhere in the air there is a faint thread of uneasiness, fragile but unmistakable to those who know how to listen. On T-bridge, officers trade short, precise words. Their boots are steady on the planks, their breath visible in the pale glow of the lamps. Charts are consulted, bearings checked. The crisp snap of the compass housing, closing punctuating the night. The course is true, the speed steady, but the reports are coming in from the wireless. Ice sightings, noted in a neat hand on slips of paper that are read and folded without comment. A decision hovers in the space between voices, whether to ease the engines or keep the pace that will bring them to New York on schedule. There is no alarm here, only the careful weighing of possibilities, as if each option were a coin balanced on the edge of a table. Below, the ship's heart beats unsteady. Unhurried, its great engines, pressing forward through the dark. Far forward, at the lookout's post, two men stand within the narrow shelter, their eyes sweeping the horizon with a focus sharpened by cold. The sea is too calm, they remark quietly. There are no waves breaking against anything ahead. No change in the silver-black sheen that stretches endlessly before them. The crow's nest sways gently, the ropes creaking as the ship moves, and the stars seem closer here, almost within reach. Breath plumes from their mouths, dissolving instantly into the air. They speak little. The night is better read with the eyes, not the tongue. Somewhere far below, the faint clang of the engine room reaches them, a heartbeat from another world. In the first-class smoking room, the hour grows late, but the conversation still glows. Like the embers in the grate, the smell of fine tobacco and aged brandy hangs in the air. The leather chairs holding the warmth of the day's many occupants. A group of men discuss the marvel of the ship's speed, remarking on how little the sea seems to trouble her. Their voices carry the easy confidence of those who have never had cause to doubt the water's obedience. The idea of danger feels distant, almost quaint, like something that belongs to another era, another kind of vessel. Outside the windows, the stars burn without flicker, their light falling cold on the unbroken sea. In second class, the lounges are quieter now. A few couples linger over hands of cards, the soft slap of each deal marking the passage of minutes. The air smells faintly of tea leaves and wool coats drying from the day's mist. Some glance toward the windows, noting the clarity of the night sky, and remark, perhaps without knowing why, that the air feels sharper here, the kind of chill that reaches the bones if you stand still too long. There is no sense of urgency, only the subtle awareness that the sea has changed its voice. The low, rolling rhythm of earlier nights has been replaced by something smoother, more continuous, like the sound of breath held too long. Below, in the warmth of the third-class common rooms, the mood is more boisterous. Fiddles scrape and thrum, feet stamp out, quick dances on the wooden floor, and laughter spills freely into the corridors. The scent of stewed meat and bread clings to the air, mingling with the sharper temps of beer and cider. For those here, the night is simply another chapter in a journey already rich with novelty, another evening of songs from home, of new friendships made over shared mugs. The cold outside is a distant fact, felt only when a door opens to admit a fresh draft and a rush of distant stars. Far below even this warmth, in the engine room, the night is measured not in hours but in shovelfuls of coal. The stoker's skin gleams with sweat despite the cold above. Their arms work in an unbroken rhythm, the clang of the shovel on iron ringing out like a muted bell. The air is thick, hot, and alive with the pulse of the engines. Orders are passed without wasted words, each man part of a living chain that feeds the ship's momentum. They are the ones who will feel any change in speed first, not with their eyes, but in the subtle shift of the piston's push, the altered breath of the great furnaces. Outside, along the promenade, the night opens wide and silent. A few solitary figures walk slowly, their breath drifting behind them in faint clouds. The boards underfoot are dry and cold, the railings hard with frost that glitters in the lamplight. From here, the sea looks impossibly still. No crests, no foam, only the slow slide of black water beneath the hull. Somewhere ahead, unseen and unheard, there are shapes in that water. Vast, ancient, and drifting without sound. But for now, the only thing that reaches the ears is the steady hiss of the ship's passage and the occasional soft crackle of ice forming in the air. In a quiet cabin, a passenger wakes for no reason they can name. The room is dim, the gentle vibration of the ship steady under the mattress. They lie still, listening perhaps to the deep hum of the engines, perhaps to something in the air that has shifted just slightly. A moment passes, and the sound is the same as it ever was. Yet, the mind, once stirred, cannot return fully to rest. Outside the porthole, the stars burn cold and constant, as if nothing in the world could touch them. This is the nature of turning points. They seldom announce themselves in the moment. They arrive as changes so small they can be missed entirely. A sharper breath, a colder wind, a note of caution folded into a routine report. Only later will the memory return to this night, to the stillness of the sea, the clarity of the stars, the quiet presence of something vast and unseen just beyond the reach of light. For now, the Titanic sails on, her decks silvered in frost, her passengers wrapped in their own worlds, and the dark ocean stretching away into a future none can yet imagine. There is a moment on every long journey when the mind begins to measure not the miles yet to come, but the small absences left behind. It happens quietly, like a shadow lengthening at the end of the day. A passenger, halfway through a book, suddenly finds their thoughts straying to a chair by a fire far away, or to a voice they will not hear again until the return. Another pauses in the middle of a sentence, spoon hovering above the bowl, because the taste of the soup so different from Homa's awakened a memory they had not sought. These moments are not dramatic. They are the soft ache of separation, the recognition that travel is not only about what one gains, but also what one must put down. And yet, within this recognition, something shifts. The absence makes space for other things to take root. For a new friendship formed over a shared table for the quiet pleasure of standing alone on a deck at night, with the wind on one's face, for the surprise of a kindness offered by a stranger. In first class, loss is often wrapped in silk and understatement. A gentleman in a dark coat, seated by the lounge window, folds a letter slowly, the handwriting on it slanting just enough to suggest a hurried departure. He slips it back into the inner pocket of his jacket, where it joins others he will not yet answer. Across the room, a woman watches the ocean while her coffee cools, her gloved hands still around the cup. Her mind is elsewhere, on a house where the lights are now lit without her, on a garden where the blooms are opening without her tending. They do not speak of these things aloud. Instead, they carry them as one might carry a photograph inside a book, hidden, but always felt when the pages shift. And yet, these same passengers will also learn that the voyage itself becomes a place of memory. The rustle of cards in the smoking room, the slow waltz in the saloon, the night they stood under stars so bright they seemed to hum. In second class, loss has a different texture, less polished, but no less profound. There are parents who have left behind grown children, their absence a gap in the daily rhythm of meals and evening talks. There are friends who parted on the quay with embraces that lingered a fraction too long, each knowing the other's voice will not be heard for weeks, perhaps months. These passengers speak more openly of what they miss, often while leaning on the rail, their faces half lit by the ship's lamps. The lessons they begin to gather are quieter but just as lasting. How a journey tests patience, how distance can sharpen affection rather than dull it, how the unknown is both a promise and a weight. Some write letters in the lamplight of their cabins, choosing words carefully so that the paper will carry not worry but hope. Others simply stand outside at night, breathing in the cold air as though it might carry some unspoken message back across the miles. In third class, loss is worn more openly, because here the absence is often permanent. Many will not return to the towns or villages they've left. Their journey is not a visit, but a departure from one life into another. The air in these spaces is warmer, more crowded, alive with the sound of songs sung in different tongues, yet even in celebration, there is the thread of what has been left behind, the field that will be planted by another hand, the family table with one less seat. Around the benches, people share stories not just of where they are going, but of what they have already surrendered. And here, perhaps more than anywhere else on the ship, light comes from the willingness to keep singing despite the weight of absence, to keep laughing even when the heart is heavy. It is the kind of courage that leaves no mark in the ship's log, yet fills the air with a warmth that cannot be measured. Loss is not only about people or places, it is also about the subtle fading of certainty. A passenger who once believed the sea could be tamed might, after a few restless nights, begin to feel its vastness in a different way, not as an enemy, but as a presence too large to be claimed. An officer who trusted entirely in the rhythm of the ship might pause longer over a chart, sensing in the stillness of the water a reminder that even the finest vessel moves at the sea as cities. These are lessons the ocean has been teaching for centuries. That confidence is not the same as control, that beauty and danger can live side by side without contradiction, and that every crossing is as much a conversation with the sea as it is a passage across it. And yet, there is Lightsoft, persistent, unafraid of the dark. It pools in the glow of lamps along the promenade, in the laughter that rises from the dining rooms, in the quiet act of one passenger lending a scarf to another on a cold deck. It appears in the morning, when frost has etched delicate patterns on the railings, turning each one into a work of art no human hand could create. It lives in the way strangers begin to greet each other as though they were neighbors, in the way the ship itself seems to cradle their lives as they sleep. The light does not erase the losses. It simply makes space for them to be carried without bitterness. There is a truth the voyage teaches slowly, that some things are meant to be let go, not because they are unimportant, but because holding them too tightly would keep the hands from receiving what comes next. The sea, in its endless movement, knows this. It carries away footprints in the sand, pulls ships from one shore to another, erases and remakes its own patterns with every tide. Watching it from the deck, one can almost believe that loss is not an ending, but a turning of the page of space left open for the next chapter to be written. And so the Titanic moves on through the night, carrying both the weight of what has been left behind and the light of what is yet to come. Passengers step inside from the cold, draw their coats tighter, and find their places in warm rooms. Some will remember this night for the frost on the rail, others for a song that carried them through a wave of homesickness, and others still for the way the stars seem to watch in perfect silence. The ship presses forward, steady and unhurried, her lights glowing against the black sea, a moving constellation of her own, making bright enough to be seen from far away, but small against the vastness that surrounds her. Legacies are rarely born in a single moment. They are woven quietly, thread by thread, from countless small actions, glances, and choices. Aboard the Titanic, the beginnings of such a legacy were already stirring, long before her name would be etched into history. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the decks were washed and the lamps dimmed, the ship felt like a living being, breathing softly in her sleep. Every corridor, every polished surface, seemed to hold the traces of lives moving through it, shaping a memory that was still in the making. It was in these unnoticed hours that the essence of what the Titanic would come to mean was slowly forming, not yet the legend, but the intimate, human story that would endure far beyond the voyage itself. The grandeur of first class seemed, on the surface, to speak only of opulence and power. But beneath the glitter of crystal and brass, subtler legacies were forming. A wealthy merchant, known for his business severity on land, was seen leaning over a table in the lounge, teaching a young boy a simple card trick, his laughter genuine and unguarded. A socialite who had boarded with an air of practiced detachment began spending her afternoons reading aloud to an elderly woman traveling alone, their voices blending in the warm light of the library. These moments would never make the newspapers, but they left a mark on the hearts of those who witnessed them, proof that legacy can be as much about kindness as about grandeur. In second class, the legacy was taking shape through acts of shared resilience. Families and individuals who might never have crossed paths in their ordinary lives found themselves drawn together by proximity and circumstance. After supper, small gatherings formed in the corridors and lounges, where passengers exchanged stories about their homes, their work, their hopes for what lay ahead. There was a sense of community that felt immediate and unforced, the kind that made strangers into allies in the face of the unknown. In these quiet alliances, the Titanic was becoming not just a vessel of transport, but a place where new bonds were forged, bonds that would ripple outward long after the ship had reached its destination. For third-class passengers, legacy was bound up in the courage to leave one life behind in pursuit of another. The shared spaces rang with music, laughter, and the sound of languages weaving together in a tapestry of human determination. Young men spoke of work waiting in distant cities, while mothers rocked children to sleep, murmuring lullabies from faraway villages. Every conversation was tinged with the knowledge that these days aboard the ship might be their last moments suspended between past and future. That fragile in-between, alive with anticipation, would become a memory to carry into the struggles and triumphs that awaited on new shores. The ship's officers, too, were unconsciously writing their part of the legacy. Their precision, their constant watchfulness, created an atmosphere of confidence that enveloped every passenger. On the bridge, a young officer might stand in the pale starlight, scanning the horizon with quiet diligence, aware that the trust of thousands rested in his vigilance. In the chart room, another reviewed the ship's position with care, making small adjustments to ensure the smoothest possible passage. The legacy of their work was not in grand gestures, but in the seamless safety and calm that allowed life aboard to unfold without disruption. Below decks, the legacy was forged in the heat and rhythm of the engine rooms. The stokers and engineers worked in a world far removed from the glittering salons above. Yet without their relentless labor, the Titanic's beauty would have been meaningless. Sweat dripped from their brows as they fed coal into the roaring furnaces, their muscles aching, their faces illuminated by the orange glow of firelight. They did not speak of legacy, but every beat of the ship's heart, the steady thrum that passengers felt underfoot, was their unspoken signature. Even the ship herself seemed aware, in some indefinable way, that she was more than a marvel of engineering. Her halls carried the mingled scents of fresh flowers, polished wood, and sea air. Her decks creaked softly under the shuffle of footsteps, and the sound of her bow meeting the waves was like a measured breathing, steady and sure. These sensory details were part of the story she was telling about herself, a story that would be remembered not only in photographs and blueprints, but in the memory of how it felt to be here in this moment, carried forward through the night. In the dining saloons, where meals unfolded like ceremonies, another strand of the legacy was being spun. Passengers lingered over dessert, sipping coffee while conversations drifted from politics to poetry to the strange beauty of the open sea. Waiters moved with the quiet precision of those who understand that service, too, can leave an impression that endures. A well-placed word, a remembered preference, a shared smile, these were the details that passengers would recall long after the menu had been forgotten. The music rooms added their own layer to the growing legacy. Each evening, the ship S-band played not only for entertainment but as a kind of shared heartbeat for all aboard. Waltzes and popular airs mingled with the gentle sway of the ship, creating moments that seemed suspended in time. A couple dancing under the soft glow of electric lights might not know that decades later, someone would remember them, not their names, perhaps, but the way they moved together, as if the music were the only thing holding them in place. On the outer decks, where the cold air bit at cheeks and the stars shone sharp above, passengers felt another, quieter thread of the legacy. The sensation of standing between two infinities, the ocean below and the sky above, with only the ship's steady presence to keep them suspended between them. Conversations here were softer, slower, as if the vastness demanded a certain reverence. Some spoke of the future in hushed tones, others of the past. All seemed aware that the moment itself was worth holding on to. There were legacies forming in the ship's smallest corners as well. In the nursery, a child's laughter rang out as a steward spun an impromptu story. In a cabin, a young woman bent over her journal, capturing the day's impressions in looping handwriting. In the mailroom, clerks sorted letters and parcels that would carry pieces of the voyage outward to the world. Each act, however small, was a thread in the larger tapestry of memory being woven in these days at sea. The crew's quiet camaraderie was another part of the legacy. In the moments between duties, they shared brief jokes, exchanged knowing glances, and offered help without being asked. These small acts of solidarity kept the ship running smoothly, but they also built a culture of care that passengers could feel, even if they could not name it. It was in the warmth of a good evening, the way a steward remembered a preferred table, or the swift discretion with which a need was met. The legacy also lived in the eyes of those who observed, who watched and listened and absorbed. There were passengers who seemed to move through the voyage as witnesses, collecting impressions like seashells saving the colors, the textures, the scents for some later telling. They might never speak of it openly, but years later, they would recall with perfect clarity the way the Titanic's lights stretched into the darkness like a floating city, or the low hum of her engines as they lay in their bunks at night. As the voyage continued, the legacy in the making became less about the grand promise of the ship's size or speed and more about the atmosphere she created. The blend of elegance and ease of order and adventure of separation from the ordinary world. Every passenger carried a slightly different version of it, shaped by their own days and nights aboard. And though none could know it yet, these impressions would grow in importance with time, becoming part of the larger story told long after the ship was gone from the sea. And so, the Titanic sailed onward, each hour adding another invisible layer to the memory she would leave behind. Above her, the stars traced their patient arcs. Beneath her, the ocean whispered against her hull. On board, lives continued in their intertwining patterns, each one contributing, knowingly or not, to the great and intricate legacy that was beginning to take shape. Time, aboard a ship, moves differently. It does not flow forward in a straight line. It drifts, circles, folds back on itself like the waves outside the portholes. Days had begun to blur into one another, their edges softened by the rhythm of the sea. You no longer count the hours by clocks, but by the slow rising and falling of the light, by the pattern of footsteps on the decks, by the distant call of a bell that marks the changing of the watch. It is as though the Titanic has gathered time into her own keeping, holding it gently, letting it expand and echo within her vast halls. You walk through the corridors, and everything feels touched by memory already, as if the ship herself were aware of being remembered, even while she still lives her moment. The scent of polished wood and faint perfume lingers in the air, blending with the salt that drifts in through half-open doors. Somewhere a gramophone hums softly, a tune that feels both new and old. The laughter you hear in the distance seems to belong not only to now, but to something you will one day recall. Every voice, every sound carries a shimmer of transience alive and vanishing all at once. On the decks, the sea stretches endless and luminous beneath a pale morning sky. The wind is cold but tender, threading through coats and scarves, tugging at letters in passengers' hands. A woman pauses mid-sentence, her words carried off by the breeze. A man closes his eyes and leans against the railing, his mind wandering somewhere far inland. Children chase each other in small circles, their laughter floating away like birds that will never return to this same place. Around them, the ship moves with patient grace, cutting through the water like a thought that cannot be forgotten. In first class, the dining rooms are quieter now, conversations softened by familiarity. People speak of what they will do in New York, of theaters, of spring gardens waiting to bloom. Yet beneath the surface of those words lies something slower and more introspective, a growing awareness that this voyage, this moment suspended between worlds, will soon become a memory they will carry all their lives. Someone takes a photograph on deck, the shutter clicking like a sigh. Another writes a few lines in a journal, unsure why the need to capture the feeling feels so urgent. It is as if everyone senses, without knowing why, that the world has turned a page, and they are the ones caught in its margin. In the quieter corners of second class, the feeling is gentler, but no less profound. Friends who met days ago now speak as though they have known one another for years. A woman teaches another to knit against the chill. A man hums a song from home that others begin to join. These moments are small and unassuming, yet they shimmer with the quiet dignity of being noticed. When they per their goodbyes will be soft, but the memory will stay a thread of warmth carried across the ocean, a reminder that even the briefest connections can leave a lasting light. Down below, in third class, the music has changed. The songs are slower, the laughter lower, but there is still life in every note. People share what remains of their food, pour tea into shared cups, and speak of the days to come. Their faces glow in the dim lamplight, their eyes reflecting both fatigue and hope. A child sleeps in her mother's arms, a soft hum vibrating in the air around them. The ship rocks gently, and for a moment it feels as if the sea itself were cradling them. Even here, in the simplest spaces, memory is forming and seen, unstoppable, like the tide that will one day return to wash the footprints from ashore. Elsewhere, in the bridge and the engine rooms, time takes a different form. It is measured not in moments, but in tasks completed, in the rhythm of machinery and the precision of hands. The officers move with quiet focus, their words few, their thoughts steady. Down below, the stokers feed the roaring heart of the ship, their faces shining with the light of the furnaces. They do not think of memory. They think of heat, of pressure, of the constant turning of the great pistons. And yet, without knowing it, they, too, are carving their place in the invisible story that gathers around every sound, every breath of steam. As night falls, the ship transforms again. The air cools, the decks empty, and the lamps along the promenade glow like a trail of stars adrift upon the sea. You walk slowly, hearing the faint creak of boards beneath your feet, the distant murmur of voices fading into sleep. Above, the sky opens in infinite clarity, each star so bright it seems to hum with its own secret. The sea mirrors that vastness, reflecting not just the heavens but the lights of the ship itself, a constellation adrift in darkness, carrying within it hundreds of dreams that will never repeat in quite the same way. You pause by the railing, your breath a small cloud in the cold air. Behind you, the Titanic hums quietly, her energy softened by the night. Around you, the ocean stretches into forever. For a moment, you feel the boundary between memory and the present dissolve. The sound of the waves becomes the sound of thought, and everything feels distant yet near, alive yet already remembered. The line between what is happening and what is already past becomes almost impossible to trace. Perhaps that is what history really is, the gathering of such moments, unnoticed while they happen, luminous only when we look back. Each flicker of laughter, each step on the deck, each reflection of lamplight on brass will soon belong to that realm of echoes, where time keeps its treasures. The Titanic moves through the night, unaware of the legend she is becoming. The sea listens. The stars keep their patient vigil, and all around you, time gathers softly, endlessly folding this moment into its eternal memory. Long after the journey has faded into history, the Titanic continues to drift through time, not as a ship of steel and wood, but as a breath caught between worlds. You can still feel her presence if you listen closely enough. A faint vibration beneath the waves, a whisper in the dark expanse of the sea. It is not the sound of tragedy that lingers, but of life, of footsteps across polished decks, of laughter carried by the wind, of quiet conversations beneath a sky filled with stars. The ocean remembers these things. It carries them gently in its depths, turning them over like stones smoothed by endless motion. You might imagine standing once more upon that deck, your hand resting on the cool rail, the air sharp with salt and starlight. The night stretches infinite and calm, and the horizon glows faintly where the water meets the sky. There is no sound but the hush of the waves and the soft hum of engines, long since gone silent. Yet in that silence, something still speaks to memory, of thousands of breaths drawn and released, of hearts that beat in unison for a fleeting moment on a ship that seemed too grand to vanish. Memory, like the sea, does not forget. It only changes form. The world above the water has transformed beyond what those passengers could have imagined. Cities have risen and fallen, generations have lived and dreamed. And yet the story of this single voyage continues to ripple outward. It appears in paintings and poems, in films that flicker with light across darkened rooms, in the quiet awe of those who read the names etched in marble. Each retelling is a wave breaking against the shore of time, reshaping the story, but never erasing its core. What remains is not sorrow alone, but reverence, the sense that once humanity reached for perfection and found beauty even in its fragility. Somewhere in the deep, the Titanic rests, her bones draped in shadow and silence. The ocean has claimed her, but not with cruelty, with a kind of slow embrace. The corridors that once echoed with music are now filled with drifting light and quiet silt. Fish glide through the spaces where people once dined and danced. Sea anemones bloom up on the grand staircase like ghostly flowers. Even here, among ruin and stillness, there is grace. The ship has become part of the living sea, a cathedral of memory where time itself kneels in quiet wonder. Every ripple that touches her hull carries a fragment of the lives she once held, sending their echoes upward toward the world above. And above that deep, you are Imana, listener, a dreamer, tracing those echoes across the surface of the water. Perhaps you have stood on a shoreline and felt the cold wind brush your face, unaware that the air you breathe has traveled across the same Atlantic that once carried her. Perhaps you have seen a photograph of the ship's deck, or heard the faint crackle of an old recording, and felt something stir a quiet recognition. A shiver that is not sadness, but empathy. In that moment, the distance between then and now disappears. The sea folds time upon itself, and for a heartbeat, you are there again, surrounded by the soft murmur of lives still whispering through the years. The Titanic endures not because of the night she was lost, but because of the nights she still inspires. In every story retold, every image of her lights gleaming against the dark, she sails once more, not as a monument to failure, but as a symbol of hope, the hope that humanity will always reach beyond what it knows, even at great risk. Her story reminds us that beauty and impermanence are not opposites, but companions, walking side by side across the same deck, beneath the same stars. To remember her is to remember ourselves, our dreams, our frailty, our longing to touch the infinite. So, close your eyes and listen. The sound you hear, the faint rush of your own breath, the slow rhythm of your heartbeat is not so different from the pulse of the engines that once carried her across the sea. The ship may sleep beneath miles of water, but her spirit drifts everywhere. In the shimmer of light on waves, in the songs of sailors, in the hush of museums where her artifacts rest beneath glass. Each of these is an echo, faint yet eternal, whispering that everything beautiful leaves a trace. And as you stand within that silence, you understand. The Titanic was never truly lost. She continues to move, not through the ocean now, but through the quiet chambers of memory, gliding endlessly between dream and history, between what was and what still is. The sea keeps her gently, the stars watch over her, and somewhere in the vastness of night, her light still glows soft, unwavering, a whisper that never fades. And now, as the night folds softly around us, the sea grows quiet once more. The great ship that has carried us through time begins to fade, her lights dimming in the distance until they are no more than a gentle shimmer against the dark horizon. You can still feel the rhythm of her movement beneath your thoughts, the slow, steady pulse that has guided us from shore to shore, from history into dream. The air is calm, the stars above are patient, and everything that once was seems to rest in perfect stillness. Take a slow breath. Let it rise and fall like the tide. You have walked her decks, heard her voices, felt the hum of her engines, and the weight of her silence. The Titanic now drifts not through the sea, but through the quiet space between memory and sleep. All the stories, all the laughter, all the fragile moments of courage and grace are still here, suspended in the dark, like tiny lights beneath the water. They glow softly, endlessly, waiting for the dreamer to return. If you listen closely, you may still hear her, the faint brush of wind along the rails, the whisper of the sea against the hull, the distant melody of a violin carried across the waves. Each sound a promise that nothing beautiful ever truly disappears. It only changes shape, finding new ways to be remembered. The ocean keeps her gently. The stars keep her company. Together, they carry her through eternity, a ship that sails forever in the quiet waters of the mind. Thank you for joining this voyage, for walking her corridors, for standing on her deck beneath the infinite night, for breathing in the same silence that once surrounded her. Your presence has been part of this story now, a soft echo added to all the others. If you wish, you may return another night, and I will be here to guide you once more to another time, another sea, another story whispered between the tides. For now, let yourself drift. Let the sound of the ocean fade into the rhythm of your own heartbeat. Let the night cradle you the way the waves once cradled the ship. Everything is still, Everything is safe. Everything is returning to silence. The sea is calm. The stars are watching, and somewhere, far and away, the Titanic glides forever through the dark, her lights shimmering like dreams that will never end. Sleep well. Well, and until the next voyage. Good night.